Hey everyone, this is something I've thought about for a long time, and I just want to put my 2 cents out there because I do have some pretty strong feelings about it. Jane Doe should be a playable survivor in Forsaken. Full stop. There is no room for discussion on this matter, she should be a playable survivor. And that's why I'm so unbelievably shocked the development team of this game seems to still plan on adding her as an NPC instead of adding her in a way that actually matters, which is by making her playable. This video is going to have some strong opinions, but I think it warrants it, and I'm not really alone in these thoughts or feelings about the character. So, in this video, I'm just going to be doing my best to make a solid argument on why she shouldn't be relegated to an NPC, because that'd honestly just be super disrespectful to the legacy of the character, it makes no sense, but we'll get there when we get there. So starting off, let's just talk about Forsaken. Forsaken got popular for a lot of reasons, but I think there's two major things we can highlight in its success. First and foremost, the gameplay. If you haven't played as many asymmetrical horror games, you probably wouldn't have had as much of an appreciation for the way this game is designed and balanced compared to a lot of other games on the market, both on and off Roblox. Once I got my hands on it for the first time, which was well before Dusukar came out, I immediately understood why this game was starting to blow up by just playing a few rounds of it. That being said too though, the gameplay is very fun whether or not you're experienced in the genre or not, it's just very tight and solid and very good compared to a lot of other games. However, there is one major element of the gameplay that's tied to our next point. The second reason this game got popular is mostly down to whatever term you want to use for it, but it's the aesthetics, brand, base, all that other stuff. This game blew up because of the characters that are featured in it. A lot of them are popular Roblox figures, and the game does a lot of creative things with these figures, characters, all that other stuff. When I was first playing Forsaken, I just thought it was a really good ASYM game until I found myself surviving Last Man Standing as Shaletsky against 1X, and then this song started playing. I couldn't help but notice the timer was also even longer than usual. Fighting tooth and nail, ending the round by the skin of my teeth at less than 6 HP remaining, that's when I knew the game was more than meets the eye, and it had a lot of plans for the future. Of course, I knew why this was probably the case because I know the legacy of Shaletsky and I know the history of 1X prior to Forsaken, and it was super exciting. Fast forward a few months, and the entire soundtrack of this game got an entire upheaval, and along the way we got PLEAD. Just look at these numbers, and then just imagine how many people heard it through other social medias like TikTok and probably seen clips, fanworks, and stuff like that. A lot of this game's success is in no doubt due to this. It's not specifically the lore, but just how the lore is packaged into the game itself. If you know about 007 and the history of Team Cool Kid, it hits. If all you know is the guy in the burger hat is the dad of the red guy in Forsaken lore or whatever, it still hits. None of this is really implied. You can experience it directly through the gameplay of a match, and it's fantastic for that. It's a lot more enjoyable for most people because instead of it being a super secret hidden thing or doing a lot of reading, it's front and center, it's loud, you can feel it and experience it when you actually play the game. Let's talk about Jane Doe. She's literally ID number 3 on Roblox and has been the subject of many Roblox hacking scares and myths of Roblox's past. Not that I should need to remind you, because John Doe is in this game already as a killer. So clearly these figures are held with high enough reverence by the development team to be front and center in the game, right? Apparently not. So again, I have no idea why Jane Doe is in this really weird state of limbo. They apparently have like meetings where they at least talk about Jane Doe becoming a survivor possibly, and for some reason that's just a super hard discussion. They just can't come to a conclusion on what they should do. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. There shouldn't be anything to debate in the first place. She should just be in the game as a playable character, full stop. She meets just about every criteria you would want to meet with flying colors. She's an important figure in Roblox history and myth history. She's practically a mandatory pick for a playable character if you're looking to make a roster with all the heavy hitters, and you evidently are considering the lineup of characters we have in the game already. The game wants to go big with its characters with a lot of legacy. I don't think you get much bigger than one of the first accounts ever made on the platform. Let's also just be clear here that John and Jane Doe are heavily tied together. They're both test accounts made on the same day and used for the same purposes. They're equals. There's no real reason to have one be the playable character and the other is just relegated to be a background NPC. And given the type of game Forsaken is, she could be the most important lore figure in the entire, thing ever of Forsaken, and she would still ultimately just be a background NPC that not a lot of people actually care about her inclusion. Secondly, is that with this game's emphasis on realizing lore through gameplay, again, Jane is the perfect candidate. Between character interactions between all the other survivors, Last Man Standing with John Doe, the sadness potential that people love in these kinds of stories, she's practically built for it, man. John and Jane Doe are very fluid, open to interpretation characters that you can interpret in a lot of different ways. Sometimes they're married, sometimes they're siblings, stuff like that. In Forsaken, they're a married couple. You know what's funny? Two Time and Azure, which are also a survivor-killer duo of former partners, that will probably get a Last Man Standing theme, a ton of unique skins and matching stuff, the whole 9 yards that you'd want from it. Like, I genuinely can't think of a reason why Jane is the exception here. Everything about her, from her legacy, the state of her actual character in Forsaken lore, the actual inclusion of John Doe already in the game as a killer, the fact that Two-Time and Azura exist and shows a willingness to portray these kinds of stories and themes, like, what is the problem? As for the actual gameplay of Jane Doe, there's so much you can do with her. Again, Jane Doe and John Doe are very open slates, and the devs seem to have a general idea on things they can do with her, from wielding a small, similar corruption-like energy to John, or wielding some kind of power similar to the cool GUI. I've seen some people say, what would Jane Doe even do, like John Doe isn't already in the game doing things that the actual John Doe doesn't do. The better question is, what can't Jane Doe do, considering how much free reign you already have with the character and what you can do with it? Granted, I don't expect Forsaken players to actually talk about things productively, but I digress. Let's just look at what is coming to Forsaken down the pipeline. Roughly 17 killers, all with names at the very least, but often renders and designs attached, as well as a general idea for their gameplay. Roughly 8 survivors as well, with many shown designs and names. So much of the upcoming content for this game is an open secret, if you can even call it a secret in the first place. There's so many confirmations for characters that we'll realistically probably never see for a really long time. But for some reason we can't get a simple confirmation on what Jane's role actually is going to be in the game, which gets even sillier when you think about the fact Jane doesn't require any permissions and isn't from any real source material. She has a very open story. Meanwhile, Flowers is hard confirmed as a killer despite requiring permissions from Vibing Leaf and Carmelia's. Flowers is also a character I just literally don't know how they could do justice within the scope of what Forsaken's gameplay even is without changing so much specifically just for this monster, or also just heavily nerfing it and changing it to the point it might be seen as underwhelming compared to the presence it has in Vibing Leaf's videos. This isn't anything against Flowers, I love Vibing Leaf's videos, and I'm super glad about the inclusion of the monster. It's just at the same time, when you compare the state of Flowers' confirmation to the way Jane Doe is just treated in general by Forsaken, it's a little ridiculous. The closest thing we have to a lore reason for Flowers actually being in Forsaken 2 is an accident where the Spectre was trying to take someone else. Will we ever learn who that someone is, or will they be playable? Probably not. I wouldn't take this tweet super seriously, again, because it's just so early, this character's so far away, and it's just a little jokey tweet almost, but it's still just another one of the thousands of cuts that annoy me about Jane Doe not being playable or not being confirmed for what are potentially lore reasons at the end of the day. In case it wasn't super obvious, I don't like lore reasons being the reason why a character can't show up at all in the game as a playable character. I think it's awesome Flowers is going to be added, as I just said, regardless of lore. It's just, again, it shouldn't be a barrier for characters being in the game as a playable character, especially Jane Doe of Roblox. Now, I think it's important to note too that Hitoko also mentions that he thinks some of the reveals for so many things so early wasn't a good idea, and he's now one of the people driving the car that is Forsaken. I personally agree, and I don't mind the game being more secretive about some things moving forward now, but at the same time, Jane Doe is kind of just that one sticking point for me because of her unique situation as an NPC, survivor, whatever this is, because she's just so much better as a survivor. If she's going to be a survivor, just clear up the confusion now so I don't think you're an idiot. If you guys still somehow haven't decided yet, let me just tell you there's nothing to discuss and you should just add her as a playable character. Again, she's one of the most important figures to Roblox in general, especially in the sphere of Roblox content that Forsaken cares about. Keeping her in this gray area of, oh, maybe she'll be an NPC, but maybe she'll be a survivor after everything just feels sucks. Everything just feels sucks. There's just no justifiable reason that she should be an NPC over a survivor. Like, there isn't. The only justification I can think of on not having Jane be playable is wanting her to be an NPC helper figure who is super important to the overarching story or whatever, like I mentioned earlier. No. That sucks, don't do that. You can have Jane Doe be super important to the lore and story of Forsaken and doing things behind the scene. That's not an excuse to not have her be playable. Especially considering the fact that to be around, I'd imagine she'd have to be in Forsaken for the most part, and if she is, there's no reason she isn't getting thrown into a trial every now and then, right? Is that how the lore still works? I don't know, the game is still an open alpha. You can absolutely change things. I love the angst potential of John fighting his mind control upon seeing Jane or whatever, like people have said before in the past. Like, John is just so in love with her that he just can't kill anymore when he sees her, something like that. But you know what I love even more than that? Jane actually being playable in the first place. Did Cool Kid or 007 not love each other as father and son? Does Cool Kid not visibly and audibly react to 07's presence in a match? Does he literally not have a unique kill animation or possibly even seems like he straight up just doesn't want to kill him in some cases? People say the relationship between John and Jane Doe is a reason why her being in the game wouldn't work, but they have other characters that do it perfectly fine. You can still have angsty lore and the power of love shaking John while still having Jane be playable and the guy who is playing as John Doe still wanting to kill her. It's not that complicated. I do love the lore of Forsaken, I really do. That being said, I don't think it's important enough to wall off these super important legacy characters from being a playable one, assuming that's the major barrier being faced here. As a matter of fact, I think because of the lore, it's just way better for her to be a playable character than a background NPC. If she's just an NPC, you're squandering so much of the potential that she has and brings to the game, way more than a lot of other characters, no offense, but that's just the legacy of Jane Doe and the fact that John Doe's already in the game. People aren't going to get much out of her inclusion if she's just a background NPC, no matter how important she is. The way I feel about it is so strong that I think Jane should just be the next survivor that gets added ahead of everyone else due to how relevant she is to the characters actually already in the game at this moment. The first new killer we're getting is Noli, a character who is building even more on 07's lore to the point I'd argue the two are deserving of a unique last man standing with the relevance they have to one another. And 07 already has Cool Kid and a ton of rich lore already. Same with 1X and Shedletsky, as well as just the general admin lore. There's already so much to work with there, there's no doubt we'll get it once we get there. But John Doe is kind of a gray area on what they could do for him in the future, and there's no better fit than Jane. I do think every killer deserves at least one unique last man standing, and that'd be a perfect choice. If we want to talk about actual gender identity representation specifically, this game is kind of wild. The roster is mostly men, but there's plenty of non-cisgendered identities such as non-binary and gender fluid represented as well. This is ultimately a good thing. There's a lot of reasons as to why diversity in a roster is important. I'm not the most qualified person to talk about these things, but a big part is just showing off these identities exist and showing that the community and development team of the game is welcoming of these people. There's likely plenty of people on the development team who aren't one of the binary genders as well, so it's just nice for them to have. This is a good thing for the game, and it's only a positive. I just need to put that out there. However, it's almost funny in a way that despite how good the representation in Forsaken is, there's also practically no women in Forsaken. All of the ones that are skins, which aren't canon nor important to the story, gameplay, or anything like that. While there are women planned for the game, practically all of them are original characters, as there's not a lot of myths or Roblox staff to pull from that are women, and a handful of them have some controversies that have various levels of severity. While many myths have women, there's not a lot of them that have them as a primary character of the myth. Now, regardless of the size of a myth, I think they deserve a shot at least being in Forsaken, whether it be through skins or characters. Jane is one of the most well-known women in myth history, which only makes the fact she's considered as an NPC over a survivor, in which her partner character that's a man is already a killer. Look, the development team is definitely not misogynistic, and you shouldn't go around saying such a thing or throwing around such accusations. However, I couldn't blame anyone for being really frustrated with the state of women representation within the game right now. And the idea that Jane is just an NPC when John is already in the game almost feels like a slap in the face. As I mentioned earlier, she meets every criteria for a survivor that the game wants and also needs. That extends from how important she is in the myth and community, as well as just the fact that there's no women on the roster. The main point of this video is just stressing as best as I can that Jane Doe is not a character that is an NPC. You do not relegate this character to an NPC. You make her playable. Not making her playable almost feels like it goes against everything Forsaken is setting out to do with its representation of Roblox horror, myths, and history. Jane Doe is just as important as John and deserves equal treatment in Forsaken as John gets. Even if Jane is the most important NPC in the game and the most important figure in Forsaken lore, that's just not good enough. I understand the idea of having big plans for the lore, but the lore is ultimately secondary to everything else you can physically see, play, and experience in the game. Even if Jane is theoretically the most important lore character, I doubt she would actually leave that much of a long-term impression on people as an NPC, and that's not what I want for her. I mentioned earlier that one of the big reasons Forsaken started to really pop off was the way the lore mattered to the gameplay. You can feel the connection between characters like Cool Kid or 007 or Shedletsky and 1X just by playing the game with the two characters. I really don't want to dismiss the lore and the story of this game, but assuming lore plans are the big reason why Jane won't be playable, that just feels extremely bad. I also mentioned earlier that I appreciate the development team for this game being a lot more secretive about the development and plans for the game moving forward, and not having us know every little thing coming to the game, right? However, again, Jane Doe is a unique situation. I've said it to death in this video, but she's one of the largest myths ever, even if she's just a bot test account at the end of the day, and John Doe is already in the game. Despite how many things are confirmed from this game, and we know that Jane Doe is coming at some point, she's stuck in Survivor NPC limbo despite how perfect she is as a playable character, and how the majority of the community wants to see her be a playable survivor over anything else. I really do think it'd just give people a lot of peace of mind, including myself, to just know that she's going to be a survivor and will come to the game at some point. The Forsaken fandom wiki claims she's going to be an upcoming survivor, but at the time of recording there's really no evidence for her inclusion. The source they reference leads to a Hitoko tweet that confirms really nothing that she's going to be in the game or not, and that was made while Sol was still a lead for the game. At least, those are my thoughts and feelings on Jane Doe and her inclusion in Forsaken. I really couldn't tell you why I care so much about this topic, I just do. A major selling point of this game is the inclusion of these legacy Roblox figures, whether they be admins or popular myths. To me, delegating one of the most important figures in mything history and just making her an NPC when everything about her makes her perfect for the game and John's already in the game, it's frustrating. But if you watch the video, you know how I feel about it already, and you know how probably a lot of other people feel about it. I won't make a lot of videos like this one in the future, I just think Jane is an important enough character to have someone with a platform advocate for her, and just point out how silly it is for her to be an NPC over anything else. My regular Forsaken content is usually going to be far more centered on gameplay videos, balance, and the like. If you enjoy this video and want to see that type of content, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and all that stuff. And of course, leave some comments too. Okay, with that said, I'll let you guys go. See ya.